What's up and welcome to Idle Insights, a show where each week I, Treavor Bettis, talk to interesting people about idle champions and Dungeons and Dragons. And joining me this week is Justice Arman. Hello!
Hello,
Welcome!
I'm here in my office at home.
Yes, you are here live on an internet show.
Yes.
Yeah. This is wild because have you introduced yourself to folks here in a moment? But like, I just gotta say up front, this is a wild show for me, chat, because Justice was the first guest I ever had on a podcast back in 2019, and now we're doing a show on Idle Champions, and we work with Dungeons and Dragons stuff regularly. Time's wild.
30 years ago.
It
We're so
feels
old
like
now.
it. It feels like it.
Yes.
Justice, if folks in the chat don't know who you are you for those fine folks who do not know?
Yeah, my name is Justice Arman. I'm a senior game designer on the Imaginative play team for Dungeons and Dragons. That's the tabletop team for the books that you might have recognized. And I am an amateur chef and baker and many more things. But
Well, you got a long list. Your business card's very full.
I looked at my business cards. They're pretty short, actually.
Yeah, we're here today. We've talked to I had Mackenzie on the show a few weeks ago. We're working our way through some of the stuff at Wizards of the Coast.
Oh, nice.
and talking to y'all about D&D and stuff and what y'all are working on. And it's this one I'm excited for because we're gonna talk about your career getting into this, but I'm excited to talk about Planescape because we got that campaign going on right now in the game, and I'm writing it, but I'm writing it off of stuff that you've written. So this is gonna be fun.
So my wife is preparing to run it right now, and so it's interesting watching her. She'll look up at me and she'll be like, "I have a question." I'll be like, "Let me answer it for you." And she'll have the books out. It's nice to see something you spent so much time writing and working on and coordinating with all the team to get used by someone you love so much.
Yeah, I love that. Well, just before we get into that, I'd like to start the show off with a little icebreaker question, which is, how'd you get into D&D?
So I was 19. I was on campus at Brigham Young University, and there was a young DM there called Colin is his name, and he walked up to me. He lived in our apartment complex out at YView, and he came up to me one day and he said, "Hey, do you want to come over this Friday and play Dungeons and Dragons?" And I said, "Is that silly basement game with the weird paper thing? Like, I don't know. I've seen it in a bunch of cartoons. Everybody's always underground. It's always the DM screen. They're like LARPing at the same time." And he's like, "Sort of." And he said, "But you can be anything you want." And I was like, "Can I be a minotaur that wears a powdered wig and has a harpsichord?" And he's like, "Yeah, come on over like an hour early and we'll bang that out and it'll be good." And I did, and yes, I fell in love and I was hooked, and things went on from there.
A minotaur with harpsichord and what was the
Powdered wig. His
powdered
name was
wig?
Beethoven was his name because he made sick beats, and that was my first character. So
I love that. You said you'd seen it in like cartoons and stuff. That made me remember. Like I genuinely think the first time I heard about Dungeons and Dragons was on like the Dexter's Lab show, where like
yeah.
they did that joke episode where he's like, "I'm a level 50 dungeon master."
I mean, yeah, there's so many like once you start playing, you start getting all the references. Like I was showing Sam the "Art thou feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?" And they're like sitting there, the dice is everywhere, and yeah, it's all over pop culture, which is it's really interesting, but and surprisingly accurate because we did actually play on the first level of this third floor apartment complex, and you had to go downstairs to get
Yes.
there. It flooded once, but we're like it like became a dungeon, which was kind of nice.
That's fantastic. I
Dank.
love
I believe the word is dank. After the
dank.
thing. The dank
Yes.
dungeon.
I do love when people get to have that as like the first experience. It's like, no, this is it's exactly what you thought it was. Like the folks at Oxventure, like the first time they played was in the basement of a bar Which
I
is
love
like
it.
that. I mean, that's perfect. You're in the basement of a tavern. Where's a better
Yes.
place to start playing D and
Yeah.
D?
And then a hooded figure approaches you, and it's the king in disguise. Who knew? And then
It's
he
ruddy,
gives you the deal.
mysterious. I do want to mention for folks in the chat because I did see Laura posted in there, and she reminded me before we started going live, and I totally forgot to say it. We're live
Live.
right now. If you have any questions for Justice as we're going, you can put them into chat with question colon and then your question, and Gabe will put them in a little text doc for later. We're also gonna be doing a giveaway halfway through the show, so I will let you know about that, and a keyword will get picked. You'll put it in the chat, and you'll be in for a chance to win 42 chests of your choice, excluding Bahamut chests.
Mm.
So okay. So we got a little backstory there of like how you got into D&D. How did that progress to wanting to do TTRPG like writing?
Yeah, it was a long time before I really started writing. So I was working in healthcare at the time out in Texas, and I found that I was writing so much for my campaigns. I am a classic textbook over prepper,
The
but I
binder that you've posted is one of the
yes,
most glorious things
yeah,
of
one of many.
organization.
It is one of many. I usually have a DM binder for each campaign, and so I fell in love with prepping, and it's something I know some DMs like to run very improvisational and don't like the prep, and some are somewhere in the middle. If I had 20 hours to prep for a game and nothing else, and I just wanted to do that, I could do that and enjoy it, right? I get lost on tangents, reading about monsters, thinking about cool things, reading articles. Um, and so what I found, I had this very big Google Doc, or not Google Doc, I think it was a Microsoft OneNote with all the tabs. By the way, if you talk about Microsoft OneNote on any social media platform, their team is like very diligent
Oh,
about like
really?
thanking people for using it. They're like, like I remember posting that when like I was barely doing this, and they're like, thanks for using the OneNote tools. We're so glad that we could bring that organization to your game. And I'm like, thanks, Microsoft. Like,
Okay, yeah.
like neat. I love that your social media person is like scouring the internet for the dozens of people that are bragging about OneNote.
There are dozens of you, yes.
There are dozens of them. But I had heard about the DMs Guild, and so what I did was I took some adventure that I ran for like a Halloween one shot. I put it actually I put it on Reddit first, and then somebody said you should put it on the DMs Guild. So I like took it off and cleaned it up a little bit, and then put it on there, and I forgot about it for like 6 months. And there was a contest somebody did for a one-page adventure contest, and I was like, I figure I could write a one-page adventure. It turns out it's very difficult to be that concise. It was
Mm.
actually really interesting um, challenge. And so when I went to submit, part of the like prize that you could get was linked to a DM Guild thing. And so when I went on, I looked, and my balance said I had like $45 or something. And I thought this was like Monopoly, right? Like bank error in my favor. I was like, I got hacked. Someone has reverse hacked me. Some Robin Hood of D&D has taken the money from the rich and distributed
And
it
giving you
to
exactly $45.
exactly $45. Everybody gets $45. That's in their election plan. But yeah, and then I realized that it was like 90 people had paid me $1 because it was pay what you want, and they
Hmm.
like said, I liked this and I want to pay this creator. And that was the first time I had ever been paid to create something,
Heck
really.
yeah.
And that just kind of lit a fire under me, and I wanted to do it more, and I did. And then I wrote a lot more things.
Yeah, I mean, you were pretty prolific on DM's Guild. You had quite a few adventures on there, ones that I even used before I knew that before I had like talked to you or anything.
That's awesome. Yeah, every
uh,
once in a while, Anthony Joyce Rivera and I will talk about like we'll see someone link, like Baldur's Gate Fall of Elturel,
yeah.
and they'll talk about it on like the Descent into Avernus subreddit. And we're like, that's pretty cool that they're still using that after all this time. It's neat.
Oh yeah, shout out to Anthony Joyce, by the way. Awesome dude. Makes incredible D&D stuff as well. But that one, the Eltray one, I actually think I saw that post come through my Reddit feed on the Descent into a Verse one. I was like, hey, I know those
Oh
people.
yeah. Yeah, it was cool. So, but yeah, and so then after that, I did a lot for the DMs Guild and then started freelancing for third-party companies. And then from there, left healthcare, started full-time at B&G, and then was
Yeah.
freelancing for Wizards. And then, you know,
Well,
what?
so Beetle and Grim though. So like that was like, did you start freelancing for them and then they hired you on, or did you apply for that? Like how did that process work?
Yeah, so I met them, I want to say at Gen Con 2018. And it was funny because I was wearing a t-shirt for my hospital that I worked at, which was named Providence out in Waco, Ascension, Texas. And Bill Rahor, one of the founders of B&G, also was an emergency department director at a different hospital named Providence.
Huh.
And so I walked up and he thought that I like was part of his hospital network and vice versa. And I met them and I really fell in love with their product. Classic over prepper. I loved the idea of these things to hand out. I was
Mm-hmm.
making handouts. I know how painstaking it is to create props. Um, and I was like, oh, I can externalize all that by doing this. And that started a kind of relationship where I would send him like one email a month. I would talk about something. I would have Sam read my email. I'd be like, hey, did I say anything silly in here? Can you please review it? She'd review it. And then I'd send it to them. I'd be like, oh my gosh, they responded. And that would go back and forth for almost a year. And then Gen Con 2019 came around. And before that, I asked if I could volunteer for them at their booth. And I had done some products and attached them and said, hey, I've written this. Maybe I can help you out this way. And he said, no, you can't volunteer, but we will pay you to come work at our booth. And then that kind of kicked off a relationship there. I started writing bonus encounters for them. And then
Yeah.
January the following year, they were like, do you want to come on full time? And I remember having a conversation with Matt Lillard where I was like, Matt, I have to stay another year. I have to stay till September or I won't get vested in at my hospital's 401k. And he's like, I hear you. We could use you now. And are you gonna wish that you didn't do this? And he was exactly right. And so I walked away from healthcare, entered the beautiful world of games, and began creating full time.
Hell yeah. What were some of the projects that you worked on at Beetle and Grimm?
So I want to say the first box that I wrote a bonus encounter for, I think was the gold edition of Eberron. Then I helped produce the Curse of Strahd Legendary
Oh,
Edition, and then I
that I have I only have two boxes from Beetle and Grimm. It is the Curse of Strahd and the Van Richten's Guide, and they are two of my
yes.
just cherished items.
Yeah, and so I worked on both of those boxes. I think the last one that I worked on was like early stages of Spelljammer, which was really cool
Mm,
because I had freelanced on Spelljammer and was like, we should do these things. Like and maybe when I was writing a little bit, I tried to work in something very small and physical that could potentially be put in a box in the dim and distant future. But
that's
it
awesome.
was very cool.
So yeah, then you made the move from Beetle and Grimm to Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
Um, like what was that like? Because I gotta imagine like that's like starting off with DM's Guild. Like that's kind of the dream. Is like, hey, I work at Wizards now. Like I write the
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, it really is. So very intimidating at first. I work next to, incredible creatives. I know you had Mackenzie on, you said a few weeks ago. Mackenzie is excellent. Everybody in our team, working alongside, Chris, who's been with the company for 25 years,
Mm-hmm.
entered around my age, back when TSR was literally, acquired by Wizards. And or I guess I don't know if the company was or just the game. I don't know the history there. James Wyatt, who's been with the company for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
Wes Schneider, who I co-led Planescape with, an incredible mentor and friend. So we're working alongside this team is uh, humbling and a pleasure. And I felt like I had reached a point in my career where I felt like The advice I was getting from my peers was about as good as I could give myself. And I really
Mm.
needed, I don't know if you've ever watched The Bear.
I've started it. I haven't gone all the way through it.
There's a scene in the second season where there is a sous chef who's giving advice to somebody about how they can improve. And he says something along the lines of, I used to think I was really good. He's like, and then this one guy started and he was way better than me. And I was just trying to keep up. And by trying to keep up with him, I became better than I ever thought I would. And that's kind of how I feel here is if I can just keep up with the people I work with, um, I will get much better. And hopefully one day someone will start who will feel the way about me that I feel about the people I get to work with now.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean that's a great way to continue forming a career because yeah, there's I have like I've never had this happen, but I've always had this fear of like eventually getting to the point where I'm like where like I'm just too cocky about what I do. Where like I've written so many Idle Champions adventures, like I can do that without even thinking. But like I never want to do that. I want to keep learning and growing my craft and my skill in different ways.
Yeah, we get such a small amount of time here. Like it is always interesting to me, I like to bake on the side. But
Hmm.
just getting into the world of baking, I found myself recently researching, how can I see these reels of these incredible bakers creating, that one chocolatier guy who's creating those works of art, or this person who makes these beautiful croissants in France that look like the ingredients that are in them. And I think to myself, like, how can I do that? I find myself researching culinary schools around me, like what night school is going to take me on that I can make something beautiful. And in researching this, it's like there's this entire world for every industry like that.
Yeah.
Incredibly granular oral traditions passed down, all of these skills that we can learn. We get such a short time to get a slice of that. So, why not try to do more things or try to get better? Always, there's always something that you can learn and improve in.
Heck yeah. So what was the first project that you worked on at Wizards?
The first project I worked on for Wizards was Radiant Citadel, and that was when I was a freelancer. With Wizards was Dragonlance. I did a very small part of Dragonlance, and then uh, uh, started co-leading Planescape with Wes.
Did so between freelancing for Radiant and being on on the team and writing for Dragonlance, like was did you find that there was a difference there, or was that it just kind of the same, but like you were now an official employee?
No, it is different, especially because my role was very different. Freelancing was really great because it opened that door, right, to the
Yeah.
people that I hadn't gotten to work with yet that I could learn a lot from. So I was just kind of absorbing, absorbing, absorbing. And then when I started on the team, I started to learn a lot more about the process. And of course, I was preparing to lead projects myself, and I never led a project as a freelancer. As a freelancer, um, at a bunch of different companies, right? Depends on how that company engages with freelancers. It can change from project to project,
Hmm.
lead to lead. What your goal is in this. Pro tip for any freelancers in the chat: most freelancers, when they turn in their assignment, they don't ask for feedback. And if you really want to get good and surprise your lead, ask them earnestly, "Hey, how can I improve? What could I have done better? What can I learn to do this again? But be better at this the next time." And it was that sort of asking that I helped learn and got exposure to different members of the team, because the first project I got to work with Wes, the second project I got to work with Chris, and then Keys from the Golden Vault was the last that I worked on as a freelancer. And so I worked with Chris and Amanda Hammond
Hmm.
on that, who were leading that book. And so by the time I had done that, I had at least gotten exposure to basically everybody that I was working with, except James Wyatt, who is wonderful, and have since, I play in a game with him, and it's very fun. But then when I got on to the team, it became a lot more granular because I needed to learn. Okay, now I know what the experience is like for an outsider.
Hmm.
I know what it's like for an outsider to transition to this. How can I, as a lead, make that experience more pleasant and, improve it knowing what I know from that perspective. And then, of course, there's all of the other things that I never got exposure to, like art orders and
Mm.
project outlines, to the life cycle of a project, to engaging with graphic design and partnering with our incredible art team. Shout out to all of our art team, but our my art director for Planescape, Emmy Tangi. I message her very frequently during the day, and Trish Yoko, Matt Cole, all kinds of people on our team that are just excellent and wonderful at their jobs, and it is a privilege to get to work with them.
That's so good. Well, let's dig in a little bit
Yeah,
about Planescape.
sure.
So, you're told you're going to be working on this book. Like, what was that like leading and working on that?
Awesome and terrifying. Um,
Had you had any experience with Planescape before?
it was limited. I had a little bit, but as I mentioned, I started playing when I was 19.
Hmm.
So I'm 31. I was born a year before Planescape released.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I'm very grateful that I had the guidance, to rely on from people who were at the company, have been there longer, but that my co-lead on that project, and like I said, my mentor, Wes played Planescape when he was a teenager.
Hmm.
And so we kind of had this twofold experience with it as the lead designers on that was, Wes had all of the history and the firsthand experience, and I was coming in at it with kind of a fresh perspective. And what are the needs of players today? What is my experience? What is the first impression that I get when I read something is still fresh. It's not, there's a lot of nostalgia when you update a setting that's so beloved. And that's a tremendous responsibility. And it's something that we approached very reverently and had many, many conversations about. And especially like you're looking at a product line that had, 10 or more projects
Hmm.
and trying to reintroduce parts of them in just one product, right? And summarize it in a way that feels fresh to new players, feels like it, does justice to the setting that came before, and yes, terrifying but awesome.
As for writing the Idle Champion stuff of it, like I had only played the game a little bit, and so like I had a little bit of an idea of what this place was, and I knew Sigil from like fourth edition stuff. I loved it in there, and so when I got y'all's book and got to like dig into like, okay, this is what the updated one is.
Yeah.
It was so cool to get to see new and fascinating things that I didn't even know existed, to then find out was like, oh yeah, no, that'd been established like when Planescape first came out and everything. But the fact that the way you all did it made it feel like it was something that came out just in 2023 and was part of fifth edition. Like there was no
Mhm.
hiccup there between older editions or anything like that. It was really cool to read through those.
Yeah. I've been very pleased with the feedback to that, and I've had people, at cons come up and tell me what they liked, and it is very special. It's also cool because it's such a big product too.
Hmm.
It has a lot of moving parts to it with, the slipcase and the three books that complicates things when you're creating it. But like I said, it's a welcome challenge. But you also get more covers, which is cool, and getting to see three different sketches come in for each of these covers and watch
I
those, get
I have them
loaded.
next to me because working on it, but like this one, it's gonna blur it. But let me see if I can get the Mort one. I
Oh
just love
yeah.
him running away from everything. It's just my favorite thing.
Yeah, and we got to call that book a parade, which
Yeah.
is a lot of fun, right? You get compendium, handbook, guide, but parade, like we were all very happy about that. And then of course, like having Tony Dieter Lizzie partner on that project was really cool. Before I ever experienced D&D, I fell in love with the Spiderwick Chronicle books. And when I was
Mm.
younger, I used to run around with, I kept it in my backpack all the time. I still have it. Is the Arthur Spiderwick's Field Guide. And I fell in love with Tony's renditions of like that weird hairy leprechaun, his dragons that kind of have this more serpentine look to them.
Hmm.
And I dig his art style. And so later finding out that he was so instrumental in this beloved setting and contributed, some of the D&D creatures. I think he also did some art for like the Merid and different creatures across D&D's lifetime. Was really cool and made a lot of sense and brought like two parts of my life together.
That's fantastic. Oh, that's so cool. I loved Spider-Man Chronicles. That was a damn
Yes.
good
I think they're
series.
making a show. So I'm
Oh, are
excited.
they?
Yeah, yeah.
I actually, the funny is, I actually liked the movie. I know it wasn't great, but I was still like, ah, it was a fun movie.
It was fun. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was fun. They fit a lot into that movie, and yeah, and they kept the most disgusting element, which is the hobgoblin spit. I don't know if I'd want to do that, but I'll
No.
just keep the Seeing Stone. Thank you very much.
Yeah. That one that's a good one to keep on you. So that like one of the things I wanted to ask you though was the I don't know if you had any input on this one, but like the glitches in the adventure, like the idea of like the
Oh yeah.
characters dying and coming back in different forms, like was that kind of there from the get-go, or was that something that kind of came into an idea for that campaign later?
No, yeah, that was in early conversations for this product. And it's kind of funny because there's two of those very weird things. There's something that I won't spoil in the adventure that is surprising to experience. And then there's that basis for the adventure there. And Planescape felt like the best setting for those weirdo things to live because, Planescape in my mind is all about, challenging expectations, uh, showing a behind the scenes look at something that you never thought about, or explaining or teasing the weird behind the scenes stuff. I know that in our video series and marketing for that, we talked about it as the backstage of the multiverse. And I think I called it Wile E. Coyote. And somebody rightly pointed out that Wile E. Coyote is not the one who punches in with the sheep. It's a different a different animal, and I feel bad because I can't remember. It's like a fox or a wolf or something. Um, I just remember seeing a comment. Somebody's like, "That's not Wile E. Coyote and the sheep. Wile E. Coyote chases the meat meat, the road runner." And I'm
The
like,
meat meat, yeah, the
"The
meat
meat
meat.
meat, the road runner." I'm like, "You're exactly right. That is not of my common knowledge."
That's great. So yeah, the reason I wanted to bring up the glitches though is because like so we started doing in Idle Champions where we've now had some of the well-known characters like glitched into other forms and stuff like
Oh,
that.
cool.
We because when we do the adventure, when we do a can or yeah, the adventure for it, like we have text that comes up that has characters talking about what's going on and everything. We picked a group of them and then just completely switched them. So we have Naeli from like the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide. She's a Githyanki now.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun with that, and that was the glitch stuff was some of the most fun with developing what we were gonna do with it in Idle Champions and the way that players have gotten to experience and stuff. So I was curious if that was something that kind of was at the core of that one because it does feel
Yeah.
like very tied into the adventure. I mean, it's a big question of what's going on,
Yeah, for
but
the adventure for sure. Yeah, that was very much there from the start and some of those early conversations. And those were very cool conversations to have like all these creatives in a meeting from multiple generations of gamers and experience at Wizards and elsewhere to sit and say like, what should this product be? Was really cool. It's like the fellowship gathering to talk about how to take the ring to Mordor. But yeah, very, very cool.
instead it's just how wild can we get?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite thing from the Planescape books?
So for the Planar Parade, I would say it's probably the Sunfly. Um,
We made a familiar of it.
I
It's so dang cute.
I love that. They are adorable, and when you see the older art of them,
Oh, I hadn't
we
seen
made
that.
them much more adorable because if you
Oh,
look at
really?
the art for the Sunfly, I think it's adorable, but others do not. It's basically like a bee with an old man's face on it. Weird old man. So we were like, how can we make these even more adorable? And I just love the idea that these sunflies kind of carry um elements of the planes with them
Hmm.
essentially, and depending on where they're aligned, they might do different things. So I really love them. And then in Sigil itself, I would say I have a soft spot for the Grease Pit. Um, there's a section of the Hive Ward that is basically like this low down weirdo monster street food alley where all of the worst flavors of the multiverse converge. And I think that's just great for, all kinds of different scenes can take place there. You could have a weird seedy meeting with like a demo dand outside a weird stand where you're buying like sausage links from Carcerai or something. Um, so that's among there. But I mean I love all of it, and the work that the team put into it is incredible, and it shows. And um, yeah, it's great.
Heck yeah. We used as soon as you were describing it, I remember the artwork in the book for like that area, and we used that as reference so many times for backgrounds for the game because it's such an evocative piece of art to just it's just weird, and it's weird in a good
Yeah.
way, and you just want to experience it.
Yeah, and then we did the Adventure Atlas, the mortuary afterwards, which is cool. So
Yeah.
if you want to look at like one of the factions in a deeper kind of lens, you can on DDB. We got to do a lot of cool maps with that. And that was my first time working with Fury, one of our art directors, who has a very kind of like metal style. Like, so it was just us basically going back and forth, being like, how can we make this even more metal? And so when you see the art of like Fractal Skull, he just looks, it's just wild. So I love
So,
it.
so fun fact, when we were doing the adventure, we hit a point where I was like, "Oh, we need a spacer between them talking to Shemeshka and going into the Outlands." And I was like, "What am I gonna do?" And like literally a pop-up notification of like, "There's an extra Planescape thing on
Oh,
D&D," and
cool.
I went and read the entire thing and wrote an extra adventure to put in there where they go back into the mortuary
Oh,
and
nice.
so we have the coffin, the animated
Yeah,
coffins
the
in there
animated
now.
coffin's super cool. Yeah, Chris
Terrifying,
come up
absolutely
with that
terrifying.
concept. Yeah, I love it. I like that I like that it's kind of like a little like Jack in the Box for what's gonna
Of
come out of the animated
nightmares.
coffin, and there's just some fun stuff in there sometimes, and some not so fun stuff in there sometimes.
I can't remember if we actually had it. Chat will be able to tell me because they've played it more recently than me, but I think we had it that the boss version of it does like grab someone and pull them in.
Oh, that's cool. I love that.
I got reminded in our chat here that we're going to be doing the giveaway here in a little bit, chat. So keep an eye out for a code word that Gabe's going to put in there, and just put it into the chat as is, and you'll be entered for a chance to win 42 chests of your choice, excluding Bahamut chests. You can get any other champion and fun stuff that you want to try and get in there. You can get Nordum because we got where. Wait, there he is. He's up there. Look, it's Nordum. You can get Nordum chests if you want. Have a happy Modron. Uh, that sounds like that should be a tavern. Happy
The
Modron.
Happy Modron. I bet it
Yeah,
probably is.
yeah, probably is somewhere.
You can
Yeah,
make it. You can make it.
it's true. So what other D&D books have you gotten to work on? That you mentioned Radiant Citadel, Dragonlance, Planescape. What else have you been up to?
Yeah, Keys from the Golden Vault. Most recently, Quest from the Infinite Staircase. And then some other things that are very secret still.
Oh yes.
But I also we put out a supplement a few weeks ago that coincided with Gary Con and PAX East. That was kind of a preview of one of the adventures that's in Quest from the Infinite Staircase, called Descent into the Lost Caverns of Saj Khan. And that version of the adventure features tournament scoring, kind of harkening
Are you
back to
serious?
yes, the competitive adventures of old. So myself and Dan Dillon worked on that adventure, and it's yeah, you get points for doing fun
Oh
things,
my
and
God.
you can compete for bragging rights, or and of course the full version of that adventure will be in the book, which will be I know there were some fans who were like, oh, I wonder if this is going to be there, or ooh, this person in this ad from DDB looks a lot like this person, and they're right, but
Oh man, I cannot believe you all did the tournament scoring. Oh my,
It was cool.
that
I was actually there at GaryCon when they were playing through it, and it was kind of fun because there's this very early part in the adventure that I actually saw Labyrinth for the first time a few weeks ago.
the first time.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was in theaters.
Oh
I went
heck
and
yeah.
saw it in theaters. And there's that scene where they're walking past all the stone faces, and the stone faces are talking, and that stone face is like upset that it wanted to say its thing, and they let it say it. And that movie came out like 10 years, I want to say, after I think it's 86 or 84, whatever. And the
Yeah.
original module that Gary wrote came out in 76 for that tournament adventure. And he has a drawing that I think he did or somebody else, like it's like a pen and pencil drawing of one of those stone faces. Uh, this is two tangents.
Oh yeah, no, we're here
But
for him.
those, but they look remarkably similar, and I wonder if
Huh.
Lantern or Labyrinth was inspired by that that face.
I
And
mean, if the majority of people working on Labyrinth hadn't played Dungeons and Dragons, I would be shocked.
yeah, yes, it was, yeah, it's pretty cool. And then it was cool walking through the hall and kind of seeing all of these tables at once, reading that box text for those faces. And so you could almost hear like this echo across the convention hall of these people going, turn back, this is not the way. That was pretty cool.
That is so cool. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that I mean, the tournament scoring thing is something that I didn't think we'd ever see again. I think that's such a fun thing to do,
Yeah.
especially with one that you know was back in the day done that way. And for folks in the chat who may not know, yeah, there's a tournament way of playing Dungeons and Dragons. You can win Dungeons and Dragons. Um,
Now, our tournament scoring for this adventure, you're scored as a group. In the original, it
good,
was kind of
good.
more general guidance about selecting, the quote unquote best player, and then they would advance to the greater caverns. And I think there's even like this thing where it's like, oh, characters might have one or more doppelgangers or whatever it says, because the same character pre-gen might have ended up in that table and have like a duplicate. It's fun watching them like work out an in-world reason for that. Um, but it's neat.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the first time that I heard about like any kind of like tournament thing because it was when I was looking into like Tomb of Horrors and stuff and finding out that the first time that showed up it was one of the tournaments that they did,
Yeah.
and that's why it's so freaking deadly is because it was supposed to be a like a tournament style thing where you if you got through this that was bragging rights.
Yeah, I think famously there was one group who, for Tomb of Horrors, corralled like a group of sheep from the nearby village, and then like stampeded the sheep through the dungeon first so that they
Yep.
triggered a bunch of the traps, which is wild that that took place back then. But yeah, and I think we have two adventures in quests that started out as tournaments. One is the Lost Caverns of Sachkan, and then the other is Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, which I think my hope is that for quests, that adventure is this book's Tomb of Horrors. The
Oh.
one that people enjoy and know about and have heard whisperings of, some element of D&D history that will surprise fans. And I think that that adventure has a lot of opportunities for that.
I think Latia Jaquez in the chat is also excited for it because there's just all caps laser pistols.
Yes, thank you, Latia. Yes, laser pistols, robots, and that adventure and many of the adventures in that book will feature a few new surprises. So if you played the original, there will be something new to explore in many of these adventures, in all of these adventures, even.
Well, I mean, while we're on that topic, tell Chad a little bit more about Quest of the Infinite Staircase if they don't know.
Yeah, so Quest from the Infinite Staircase, it releases this summer. It is an anthology of 6 classic adventures united through the framework of the Infinite Staircase, this extra-dimensional staircase that connects to all places. On the front of the covers, you will see a very handsome, noble genie whose name is Nafas, who acts as this kind of storyteller that ties together all of these adventures. So the characters, you can play them individually or as a campaign. And what's wonderful about the Infinite Staircase itself is that you can use it to tell basically any D&D adventure, because unlike traveling to the city of Sigil or being able to plane shift, all it takes to travel the planes through the Infinite Staircase is you really just have to find the right door. So any door that your DM wants it to be could be a door to the Infinite Staircase. And then, so there are 6 adventures in this anthology, some very beloved adventures that have not been explored in this edition of the game, and some maybe lesser known gems that I know we have some fans of. I believe Polygon did an article this week about some of these adventures and spoke with John Peterson and someone else, I can't remember their name, but they pointed out one of the adventures as When a Star Falls, one of the UK TSR team's adventures, as their favorite D&D adventure of all
Oh,
time.
wow.
And honestly, in this book, I have a very soft spot for Expedition, but my favorite might actually be When a Star Falls, because both of these UK adventures are they were kind of ahead of their time in a way. I was chatting with a journalist from The Guardian at GaryCon about why he thought the designers in the US team and the UK team wrote their adventures in different ways. And
Hmm.
we talked about there's one adventure in the book that the original is inspired by the works of William Shakespeare. Um, and maybe it's the the UK's appreciation of theater that was maybe that influenced some of those story beats in these adventures, which is kind of fun because it's like, in the UK, they're like, well, this is inspired by the works of William Shakespeare. And then Gary is like, laser pistols, laser pistols, laser pistols, which is kind of awesome. And I love both of them. So it'll be really cool.
That's really good. So how do I mean I don't know if you can really go into much detail about
Yeah,
this, but
yeah.
like how do these adventures, these older adventures, get decided on when you're working on one of these books that's going to collect them? Because this is
Yeah.
Wizards has done several of these now, and I've appreciated each one of them because I love bringing forward those older adventures. How do those get picked?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into the decision. They're not chosen in a vacuum. These are um, I looked through a lot of the annals of D&D history, and with the 50th anniversary this year, I wanted to select. I didn't want to bring any adventures from, third or second or fourth edition. Really, I wanted them all to kind of be classics. So
Okay.
we had a big list of adventures. As some had already been covered, like we talk about the Tomb of Horrors against the Giants had already been covered in Tales from the Yawning Portal. Some beloved adventures covered in Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And so part of what I wanted to do was also leave some beloved adventures in the tank in
Hmm.
case we ever have another anthology, right? That there's still some really great ones that people might have expected, but maybe that we have for the future.
Hmm.
Based on these, trying to identify some common themes that we could tie together. But the biggest thing for these is that, this is the 50th anniversary, and each of these adventures has made history in its own way. Um, we talk about an adventure that's inspired by the works of William Shakespeare. The original, way back in the 1980s, had a no combat option, which was part of the inspiration for The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So
Huh.
you can see, like, even in the era of hack and slash dungeons, that was kind of ahead of its time. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Another one has a very interesting adventure hook. And some of them some of our fans who remember the physical Dragon magazines might remember the 30 greatest D&D adventures of all time article that was in, I want to say, Dungeon 100 and whatever, something. But it was on the 30th anniversary of D&D that article went live. So in there you can hear names you might recognize, like Keith Baker and Chris Perkins, all helping to select what they thought were some of the best D&D adventures of all time. And so I scoured each of the
Heck
adventures
yeah.
from that list, from this panel of experts 20 years ago, to see which ones they really liked. And so a lot of the adventures that are on that list, or a lot of the adventures from this book, you will also see on that list.
Heck yeah. I mean that I cannot imagine how much fun that was going through those old adventures and be like, okay, which ones do I think are gonna make good adventures now, and but also keeping in mind that like leaving the gems for later. That had to be a tough but fun task.
Yeah, and there's some that like thematically we've sort of covered or are just too large to do justice in the page count that we have. Like you have Princes of the Apocalypse, right, which serves as kind of a spiritual successor to the Temple of Elemental Evil.
Hmm.
I don't think we could have included the Temple of Elemental Evil in this book because it needs to breathe, right?
Yeah.
So it's much better to take like one of these 32-page adventures that's relatively self-contained and put that in there and make that shine in the anthology, and then reserve some of the longer ones. I mean, there are some really great adventures too from D&D's history that are just quite long and could probably would struggle to fit into an
Yeah,
anthology
for sure.
like this.
I did notice that Latia also put in the chat. Fun fact: the original Barrier Peaks is Stephen Colbert's favorite module.
It is, yes. Stephen Colbert it got a suit of powered armor, and he played a paladin, and he accidentally ripped someone's head off, and it broke his oath. So he lost his powers. He says he was talking to a commoner. I think he like grabbed their head or something and tore their head off. And he's like, and then I lost my oath, which is hilarious. So I hope Stephen Colbert plays through the update and enjoys it.
I do too. I do too. I hope no one loses a head for it.
Yes,
Justice, let's check out what chat's been up to while we've been
sure.
talking with some questions. Garwar is going to start things off with question. Justice, how's your pizza making journey?
My pizza making journey is going well. It's on a bit of a hiatus. I've stepped away to work in the baking world and hoping that some of that bread making and dough making skills will transition to a more succulent crust. But I did secure the new uni model that they released last year. It is still in the box, but now that things are warming up here in Seattle and we're getting some sun, I will be breaking that out soon. So expect some pizzas to hit the line on my Instagram and whatever x.com is called these days.
Ugh. I'll follow you on Instagram and see those.
Yeah.
Cassius335 says, question, when does Wizard of the Coast become an actual D&D wizard subclass? School of Surf, maybe.
Yeah, until then, I maybe advocate for multi-classing as a land druid, the coastal one, and then take a level in wizard, and then you sort of have a wizard of the coast.
That's fair. That would be pretty cool. Let's see. Catch335 has another question. It's a follow-up. Lauren has a bunch of food monsters she can throw into that effort. Yes. So I guess, yeah, if you need some food monsters, Lauren's got you covered.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. I would love to have an adventure in which there is a large ooze that is some version of a sourdough starter.
Oh, oh.
Like many people from who experienced the pandemic and experimented with sourdough starters will be able to relate to that. There's also in Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidentials, he has a very interesting story about feeding a certain sourdough starter that is basically has to be weighed down with all kinds of objects, otherwise it spills out of its test tube.
Oh dear God. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. When everyone was making bread during the pandemic, there was a problem. I was like, oh, maybe I should try making some bread. And then I remembered that Brooklyn Nine-Nine episode with the sourdough starter. I'm like, nope, that
Nope.
grossed me the heck out. And
Yep.
nope, I'm all set. And everything I've seen of
Alive.
that since, I have that was the correct decision. I did not need to do that.
So creepy. Have you ever seen the thing where they have the bowl of sourdough starter and they like spin it and
Yeah.
it
Oh.
moves? It's like a very specific phobia, like that it definitely brings out in me.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. You know what? Cassius335 is gonna get the last question as well. We ironically know so much about the Forgotten Realms. Will we ever learn about the half remembered realms?
The half
Cassius,
remembered realm. You never know. You just might. I love the half remembered realms, and I think of them fondly. And my Storm King's Thunder game I did a few years back. I love that big exploration chapter, where you can go all the way out to Anarok and to get a taste of Icewind Dale, and yeah, I would love to revisit some of those locations.
yeah. Well, we got to start wrapping things up, Justice, because we got a show coming up after this. But 50 minutes have flown by somehow. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about all things D&D.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If people want to find you and what you do on the interwebs, where could they do so?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I guess I have a website. It's basically my name. I'm on X sometimes. I don't really do a lot of games on my Instagram, but if you want to follow my baking journey, I'm Justice Ramin Arman on Instagram because Justice Arman was taken by a very patriotic person named Arman. And then on Twitter, I'm probably Justice Ramin Arman, I believe, as well.
Well, I'm definitely gonna find you on Instagram so I can see that pizza making journey this summer, as well as
Yes.
whatever baking things you do as well.
Yes.
Uh,
Vito Iacopelli on YouTube has some great pizza making tips if you're wondering how you can get a soft but crunchy crust in your own home.
Good to know. Oh, hey, Allie Bug is in the chat. That's Allie that was co-host on
Oh, hey,
difficulty
Allie.
class. Hey, Ollie.
Long time no see.
But yeah, that is gonna do it for this week's episode of Idle Insights. So until next week, take care of yourself.
Thanks, y'all.